Welcome back, Irish fans, to another edition of Irish Breakdown. We've got an interesting game here coming up, Brian. I don't know if you're aware, but Notre Dame is playing the number one team in the country on Saturday night at Notre Dame Stadium, which is mildly exciting.
Yeah, mildly exciting. This is the biggest game at Notre Dame Stadium since 2005. It's the biggest game since the USC Notre Dame game in 2005.
That was a great game.
Obviously it's going to have a different feel because it's when I get there on Saturday, you're not going to have the tailgating and the tens of thousands of people, but it's still a huge game, and it's a big game for Notre Dame, and it's a big game for the Notre Dame defense because this has been the unit that for all season has really carried this football team.
Yep.
If you think about it, if I'd have told you before the season that the Notre Dame offense was going to score 12 points against Louisville, you'd have been like, "Ooh, Brian Kelly's he's going to be in the hot seat after that game because you can't lose at home to Louisville." Well, they did score 12 points against Louisville, and they won because Notre Dame held Louisville to 7 points.
Right.
And really held Javion Hawkins to a career worst game. And if you look at what he did before the Notre Dame game and then after the Notre Dame game, the anomaly on his resume this year is the Notre Dame game because it was a dominant performance. So if they're going to win this game, Vince, there's a couple matchups in my opinion, and I know you have a couple matchups in mind that are really going to be key to Notre Dame being able to pull off this victory when you look at aspects of the Notre Dame defense against the Clemson offense, because Notre Dame cannot, in my opinion, win a shootout against Clemson. They're just not good enough on offense. The defense has to be at its best. That doesn't mean you're going to hold Clemson to 7 points, right? I don't see that happening. But it does mean keeping them in the 20s. And if they can do that, then I think the offense will have those opportunities. But there's some matchups, in my opinion, that need to go well for Notre Dame to play at its best and make enough plays on defense to win this football game.
Well, in the Notre Dame defense, based on their play this year, their play last year, the game plan that Clark Lee generally brings to the table for Notre Dame, this is the side of the ball that I'm the most confident in going into this game. And, of course, there's going to be matchups that we're going to be keeping our eye on because – Notre Dame doesn't have to play a perfect game to win this game, but they need to be solid. And I don't see another scenario in this game where the defense isn't one of the headlines coming out of it if Notre Dame wins.
Agreed.
I mean, they're too good of a group.
I don't think the margin for error in this game is as narrow as it was in 2018. Is to your point. I think that the gap has been narrowed between Notre Dame and Clemson, partly because this isn't as good of a Clemson team as it was in 2018, because it's a much younger and less experienced Clemson team now,
and they've got injuries.
Right, so and now the 2021 Clemson team, we'll be having a different conversation about. But Notre Dame is catching them in a year where they've got 4 new starters on the offensive line. Trevor Lawrence is out. They're completely remaking their receiving core. They've had to remake their safeties. Their linebacking core, which already lost Isaiah Simmons, now is down 2 starters. And they've got a bunch of freshmen and redshirt freshmen playing along the defensive line, and their defensive line is beat up. Justin Foster has been injured. Tyler Davis is out for this game. So everything is breaking in Notre Dame's direction for this game. But even with those guys out, this is still a really talented Clemson offense, even without Trevor Lawrence. And the defense is going to have to be at its best. But this, to your point, though, Vince, I am less concerned about the defense being able to continue their level of play. And I think the Louisville game did it for me. That was the key for me, because the rest of the offenses Notre Dame's played haven't been that good. But they've really done to those teams what you're supposed to do, with the exception of the Florida State game, which, again, was weird. It was after 2 weeks off, and it was after the pandemic situation, and their secondary, they didn't have guys at practice all week. So I kind of tossed that one out. It's the anomaly. They've just really been a dominant defense all season, and they're going to need to be. And for me, in this game, Vince, it's the line play on both sides of the ball. We did a video where we broke down the matchups that are most important to success for the Notre Dame offense, and it started with the offensive line for me. The difference in this game, or in this matchup, when you look at the Notre Dame defense against the Clemson offense, is I'm looking outside. Dalen Hayes had a good game last week, but the guy that I think could have the biggest impact in this game is Adi Takumbo Ogundiji. And his matchup against the Clemson tackles, you obviously have Jackson Carman at left tackle and Jordan McFadden at right tackle. They're a pretty good pass blocking group, but I think Ogundiji kind of has the combination of size, power, length, and experience to be effective against this group, especially when he's matched up against Jordan McFadden, who's a very talented player, but he's 6'2", not super long. I think that's a matchup where you could really see Ogundeji be successful, because if Notre Dame can get pressure off the edge, and if they can get four-man pressures, it's going to allow Clark Lee to have a lot more success disguising what he's doing defensively, which is really what you need to do to get this quarterback off his game. If people think you just get pressure on the quarterback and you hit him and he'll fold, no. This kid will. What you got to understand about
250 pounds.
Well,
okay?
And not even just that too, but he came from St. John Bosco. He's played on national TV games before. He's been a quarterback for the number one team in the country before. He's played in these games from teams all around the country. So it's not the same, but look, the difference is he's playing this great Notre Dame team, but there's not 80,000 people in the stands. It's going to be more like a high school crowd. I mean, if we're being honest about it. So they're not just going to hit him a couple times and he's going to fold. No. You're going to need to disguise coverages, mix things up, get him thinking that he's seeing one thing, but then you do a different thing. But at the end of the day, if you can't rush the quarterback with four, you're going to be in trouble. And that's why I think the one guy that could have the most type of disruptive impact is Ogundeji. And I think back to the Boston College game last year, where he just took that game over and just dominated what at the time was considered a really good tackle tandem at Boston College and Tyler Vrabel. And I think Ben Petrula was the other tackle in that game. He's moved around so much in his career. He's played center, guard, tackle. I think he was a tackle in that game. And he needs a similar performance. And if he can just dominate on the edge, and then now Clemson has to worry about, maybe they can't release Travis Etienne into pass routes as much because they need him to chip on the end to help out with Ogundeji. Maybe they have to they have to keep Braden Galloway, their talented tight end. Maybe they need to keep him inside more to help with Ogundeji. So you say, hey, look, we can't handle this guy, which is a tackle, so we can't use our tight ends and our running backs who've been a big part of the pass game. Travis Etienne has more receiving yards this year than any running back in the entire nation. He's 10th in the ACC in receiving yards. So if you can be really disruptive up front and force them to keep him in the box to help with pass protection, that's a win in two regards. Not are you pressing the quarterback, but now you're taking their second best pass weapon out of the pass game. So that's why I think it's really important that Ogundeji especially really comes out. I mean, you need Dalen Hayes to be successful pass rushing. You need Isaiah Foskey there. But if Ogundeji can really take his game and be dominant, I think that's the matchup for me that it begins right there. If you can win that matchup, then everything else is going to be a lot easier.
Well, you and I, in a surprise move, had a very similar one. Mm-hmm. You can see on my notes here, I have Dalen Hayes and Ade Ogundeji versus the tackles for Clemson, and for that matter, versus the quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, or however you say his last name. Yeah, and but he was way too comfortable in the game last week. He was just way too comfortable, and you mentioned his pedigree and where he comes from. If he's comfortable, it's going to be just like a high school game, and he's going to dominate. He had over 300 yards passing in the last game. He looked ridiculously comfortable. You have to get him uncomfortable, and it has to come from the outside pass rush.
Because for me, Vince, when you watched him play last week, I wasn't surprised that he throws really hard. I wasn't surprised that he can throw it deep. I wasn't surprised that he can run. The thing that surprises you, and it's a surprise anytime you see a freshman quarterback do it. It's not specific to him. But this is when you know a guy is a great talent. It's Boston College gets the ball first. First play of the game, Phil Dracovic goes deep. Big play. A couple plays later, they're in the end zone. It's 7-0.
Right.
And DJ comes right back and just, goes for 3 for 3 on the next drive. Has another pass that, results in a pass interference. BC brings a blitz off the edge, and he just lofts it over the linebacker's head, hits Travis Etienne, who runs in for a 35-yard touchdown, right? Like, that level of poise impressed me. They're down 28-10. They get the ball back with a couple, less than 2 minutes left. Actually, maybe there's about a minute left against BC. He just calmly leads them down the field and gets them in field goal range. Then you come out in the third quarter, and you're thinking they're down 15. The freshman's going to press. He may think, I got to go make a play, and he just calmly led him right down the field again for another touchdown. And that level of poise is impressive. And you're not as Notre Dame, you're not going to be able to rattle him with 80,000 screaming people. Which, let's be honest, the way that Notre Dame has been the last few years, there have been a lot of orange in the stadium on Saturday. But the point is, you're not going to rattle him. You're not going to scare him. You're not going to, the hits are important because it's going to throw his timing off. It means he's going to have to rush throws, those kind of things. Now, if you can get pressure on him and get him thinking, and that's why for Dalen Hayes, for me, it may not even be as big of an impact as a pass rusher. I can see scenarios where Notre Dame lines up with thinking, and he's thinking Dalen Hayes is going to come off the edge again after what I saw last week, and I'm going to bang this quick hitch route, or I'm going to bang this quick out into the boundary, and all of a sudden, Dalen Hayes is dropping into coverage, and they're bringing Jeremiah Wusu or Kyle Hamilton off the same side of the field as Adi Ogundeji, and he's throwing it right into Dalen Hayes' hands, or they jumped my number one route. Now I got to rush to my second read. And now that I know the pass rush is coming because Ogundeji's been getting to me, and now Owusu's coming, I got to rush to my number two read, and he doesn't see Kyle Hamilton stepping in front of that in cut or something like that. That's how you're going to impact the freshman. That's how you're going to – and that's with any freshman, because what he's going to see on Saturday is going to be different than anything he's ever seen. From a speed standpoint, Notre Dame's got a very athletic back seven. From a coaching standpoint. But at the end of the day, Vince, if you're not getting four-man pressures on him, then you're going to have a much harder time being able to utilize your linebackers and safeties and coverage and to be able to make that play. And that's what was so impactful, in the Pitt game, because Pitt likes to throw the ball a lot. The fact that they were able to get pressure their front four allowed them to use their linebackers more in coverage, and guess what happens? Linebackers get 2 picks, down the field picks, because you don't have to bring them on pressures. And I think the same thing applies. Now, look, Clemson's way better than Pitt. I'm not comparing the two, but I am saying if the front four can be as impactful, then I think you're going to see a similar impact. So to me, I think that's why we're both on the same page in regards to that's the matchup. And I think with Ogundeji especially, that I'm going to have my eye on. And if he's dominant on the edge against the run and especially against the pass, I'm going to feel like this Notre Dame defense has a chance to do something special.
Yep. Completely agree with you.
What's your second one, Vince? What's your second matchup?
So this one is, I don't exactly know how to explain it, but I basically said Travis Etienne versus the entire defense. And here's the reason why. Because he's a threat out of the backfield running the ball. Obviously, he's one of the best running backs in the country. He's a threat out of, they can line him up in the slot. They can run him into pass routes from the backfield. They can line him up as an out receiver. He's the second leading receiver on this team. You need to locate number 9 every single play. And it's not Travis Etienne versus the linebackers or versus the safeties or versus the corners, because at some point in the game, he's going to be versus everybody. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's Travis Etienne versus the defense, because you have to know where he is at all times, because he can hurt you not only on offense, but they'll also put him, back on kick return. They'll put him on punt return. Whenever they need a big play.
So it's Travis Etienne versus Notre Dame is basically where you're going with this one.
That's pretty much exactly where I'm going.
Well, and I think without Trevor Lawrence, it makes a lot more sense. And I agree with you that look, Clemson's going to watch film of Notre Dame and say, we got to try to get number 9 isolated against number 33. We have to do it. We have to try to get number 9 isolated on under routes against number 40, right? That's Notre Dame's 2 inside linebackers. But at the same time, if you're Clark Lee, you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to try to figure out ways to get Kyle Hamilton and Jeremiah Wusu on him. And ultimately, when you break down film of Clemson, a lot of the plays where he's been most successful in the pass game are plays when he is out in a situation where Notre Dame can put Jeremiah Wusu or Kyle Hamilton on him. And that's why that's my second matchup. I think that the difference between this Notre Dame defense and the Notre Dame defense from 2018 is the 2018 defense had absolute game wreckers up front. Julian Okwara that season was a game wrecker. Jerry Tillery that season was a game wrecker. At times, Khalid Kareem was a game wrecker. In the back seven, they had really good football players, but they didn't have the kind of elite athlete and the elite game wrecker type of players that this 2020 defense does. And now in some games, I think you miss not having the game wreckers up front. Against Clemson, because of the makeup of their roster and their strengths right now as a program, I think it's an advantage for Notre Dame to have those elite players at linebacker and safety in Owusu, Koromoa, and Hamilton. Because now, look, you weren't going to feel comfortable putting Drew Tranquil or Osmar Bilal or Tavon Coney on Travis Etienne in the pass game in 2018. As good as they were, that was not a matchup you like.
No.
I feel good about putting Jeremiah Wusu or Kyle Hamilton. You weren't going to feel great about having Alohi Gilman or Jalen Elliott. They were excellent players. That just wasn't their game.
Right.
Now you have two athletes that you can say, if we get into a situation where we've got number 9 matched up against our number 6 or our number 14, if you're looking at it from a Notre Dame coaching standpoint, you're going to feel really good about that.
Mm-hmm.
And you need, as a coach, you need to utilize that. And I think some of the ways that Notre Dame can do that, and here's why I bring this up. I think that, number one, I think they can run with him. I think Jeremiah Wusu is tremendous in space. When they run those swings and those screens, they're going to try to get him the ball in a lot of different ways, because this is not the rushing Clemson team it's been in the past couple of years. Their offensive line's just not as good right now. He's averaging less than 90 yards a game. His 5.9 yards per carry is impressive compared to a lot of other backs.
Yeah, right.
But compared to what he's done, he's never been lower than like 7.2 in his career for a season. So that's a big drop off. And he was 8.1 the year they won the national championship. Last year was a down year at 7.9 compared to where he was the year before. So they're just I just don't see a scenario in which he's going to run the ball 25 times for 150 yards. If he does, then this is going to be a long day for Notre Dame.
Oh, no doubt.
I think this is a scenario in which Clemson is going to, and I think Tony Elliott is an excellent play caller and game planner. And I think he's going to try to do different things to move Travis Etienne around, get him the ball. He's going to run angle routes. He's going to run delay routes. He's going to run screens. He's going to line up in the slot. He's going to line up outside. They're going to move him all over. The difference between Notre Dame and every other team Clemson has played so far is all those other teams didn't have Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah level players, and they didn't have a Kyle Hamilton level player. And that's why I think that's an impactful thing. But here's the other part of that, Vince. If Clark Lee is impactful from a play calling standpoint,
mm-hmm.
and he's able to effectively use Jeremiah Wusu and or Kyle Hamilton as blitzers in sort of a stack situation where he brings one and not the other, and then the other one is kind of protecting the other guy, then Clemson's with a choice. Like, okay, we're running 5-man protections and we're free releasing Travis Etienne, but they've got a Wusu-Koramoah or Hamilton on him every time, and the other guy's blitzing and it's getting home. And if those blitzes get home, then now you've said to Clemson, you're going to have to keep him in and block. And it's a similar situation to what we talked about. So those 2 points of mind play off each other. If Ogundeji's having a big game, and Clark Lee's able to effectively design and call blitzes at the right times where either Hamilton and or Owusu-Koramoah are hitting home, right. Now you're really, really in a tough spot if you're Clemson, because now you're going to have a really hard time justifying getting Travis Etienne out or using your tight ends out. And the more guys you can get inside protecting the quarterback, the better it's going to be for Notre Dame, because they don't have T. Higgins and they don't have Justin Ross. They have good receivers that can make plays.
Young too,
but right,
yeah,
but
a lot of youth.
They're just not as good as those guys. I mean, Justin Ross was a freshman the year that they won the national title.
Sure,
he's just a freak. They don't have that kind of freak on this team. Really good players, but not that level of freak.
Right.
And we see what T. Higgins is doing in the NFL right now. Him and Joe Burrow are hooking up quite a bit. So they don't have that. And if Notre Dame can make this a game where the quarterback's got to sit in the pocket and they have to keep Travis Etienne to pass protect because of the front and because of what we're seeing with those blitzes, I think that plays right into Notre Dame's hands. And I think that's going to make Clemson a less effective offense. And again, doesn't mean they're going to only score 10 points, but that's how you keep them in that 20 range, which is where I think Notre Dame needs them to be to be able to have a big game. And that is the final piece, Vince, is that is where, if you're having success in those two areas, now you're getting, your young quarterback starting to think more, and he doesn't have that security blanket in Travis Etienne anymore. And that's how you can force, maybe you get him to hold on to the ball a little bit longer, and you can get a strip sack, or maybe he holds on a little bit longer and thinks he's going to get here, or he sees Jeremiah Wusu blitzing off the edge, so he swings it out to Travis Etienne. Unbeknownst to him, Kyle Hamilton screaming downhill. Right. So I think that's where you can start getting them into some mistakes, because I think this time Notre Dame has the athletes to match up with Clemson, where they had really excellent football players in 2018, but they weren't on the same level as Clemson athletically. They are now. And even some of the guys that aren't playing as well for Notre Dame, Shane Simon's not been a great player, but Shane Simon athletically can match up with a lot of people. Sean Crawford, even with all his injuries, is still an excellent athlete. Tariq Bracy's an excellent athlete. This is a very athletic Notre Dame football team, especially more so on defense. And I think that's why I think that matchup is so important, because your dudes have to be your dudes have to be better than their dudes. And Notre Dame wasn't going to do that in 2018. They had to overwhelm Clemson with their 11.
Right.
And with the exception of 4 or 5 plays, they did that. But why did they get those 4 or 5 plays? Because there were those positions where Clemson was elite and Notre Dame was good, but they weren't elite.
Well, especially
this year,
when they go out in injury. Yeah.
Right. Especially when Julian Love went out. But this year, you have the elite athletes in Jeremiah Wusu and Kyle Hamilton that match up against where they're elite.
Right.
And I think that's where, because there's a lot of players in this team that played in that 2018 game. The 2 that we just talked about did not. Kyle Hamilton wasn't even on the roster.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, and Jeremiah Wusu was redshirting. So now you fast forward 2 years, and now all of a sudden you've got a couple athletes that Clemson's hasn't seen yet, and they're not going to see. And even when you look at their own roster, it's not a situation where like they have a Kyle Hamilton on their team that they can do 7-on-7 against this week. They don't have a Kyle Hamilton. I would argue that they don't have a Jeremiah Wusu. They have some inside linebackers that are special, but they don't have a guy that can go out in space and do what Jeremiah Wusu can do. So I think that's something that Notre Dame has to know. I think they do know it, and how Clark Lee utilizes that. And then, of course, at the end of the day, those 2 need to play like All-Americans, and I think they will.
That's why they're here. I mean, that's why they're at Notre Dame, right? I mean, for the big moments.
Right.
So those are our defensive matchups for the Clemson Notre Dame game. We are so looking forward to this game. Make sure you stay locked into Irish Breakdown, our YouTube channel, as well as irishbreakdown.com, because we have all the analysis coming at you. So we will talk to you next time.